While we wait for those check-in questions to come in, for those of you that are new here, Shimmer is an expert ADHD coaching platform. So in addition to working with an expert ADHD coach in one-on-one sessions, we also have other experiences like weekly body doubling sessions, learning modules, and free events like this one for the public. So as we transition into the topic, I'd love to introduce our host for today, Coach Beth. Coach Beth is an expert ADHD coach here at Shimmer. She's been with us from the start, over 2 years now, and is our resident expert in all things system and curiosity. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Beth.
Thanks very much, Alex, for the lovely introduction. And thanks everybody for coming today. I hope this is helpful for you. Let's get started because I think I'm about to just say what's on the first slide anyway. So yeah, this is an interactive workshop. So I think everybody has something to share and offer, and I think we can all learn from each other. So if you feel comfortable, throw it in the chat or come off mute and say something. I think it can be really helpful, but also if that's not your jam, it's totally fine if you just want to sit and listen, whatever works for you. Okay, so we've got kind of 3 parts to this. So we're going to look at the systems in a way that hopefully is unique, in a way that you haven't before, to help gain some new insights on them. And then we're going to talk about maybe how ADHD and symptoms of ADHD might be playing a role in what's going on for you. And then we're going to do some things, use these insights to make a plan to increase our odds of success. So the first one, so let's take stock. So what we were imagining is that when you signed up for this workshop, you were thinking about a specific system. So for me, it's feeding myself. Meal planning and groceries and cooking food is really helpful things. So I'm going to go through that for myself with this during this workshop. So I'm wondering for you what that system is. So what is the system or thing, the problem, the challenge that you're having? And what would be helpful to walk away from today with around that? So feel free to share what that is for you in the chat again, or you can just come off of mute.
I have a question if possible.
Yeah.
What do you mean by system?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So maybe system is like jumping the gun. Maybe it should be, what's the problem? What's the thing that's not working in your life? So for me, it would be meal planning. It would be feeding myself, specifically meal planning. And I think it's helpful to be really specific about where you feel the problem is coming down. Because I know if I've got a plan, which means I'll have a grocery list, means I will grocery shop, means I will cook the things, and I most likely will eat them. So what specifically is the challenge that you've come today with? Does that answer that question?
And in the chat, we're seeing my morning routine, task tracking and prioritization. Someone else has also identified meal planning for their family, being with
Nice.
on getting started on schoolwork, having a strategy to streamline things, self-care, accountability.
I'd challenge you to try and get more, thank you for sharing those, to get more specific about them. So what specifically about homework? Is there a type of homework that is a real challenge for you? Do you have any hunches as to where in that process that things fall apart for you? Just so we can the more specific we are, the easier it is to help figure out what's going on. Is there a type of task? What does streamline mean? Does anyone want to share any of those?
Task initiation after a transition to a new task.
Oh, that's very specific. Well done.
Committing to a reminders app.
Making sure big goals are broken down. Oh yeah, that's a great. Shall we move on to the next slide? General housekeeping, meal planning. Oh yeah, I feel that. Okay. So if you've ever been to a presentation with me before, you know that I'm all about the context. There's always a reason for everything. Behavior makes sense in context. We just don't always know how and why. And hopefully today we're going to shed some light on that. So the good, the bad, and the context. Okay. So what I first want you to think about is, if you were to make a scenario where your chances of success were at their lowest, what would that look like? What would be happening there? Who would be involved? Who wouldn't be involved? What time of the day would it happen? What time of the week would it happen? How would you be feeling going into doing it? What else might be going on in your life? Essentially, what's the context of your life in the moment if you had to set yourself up for the least success? So I'm going to give you some time. And I'm going to write down my own stuff, and then we'll come back off mute and share those. Okay. I've written some down here. Has anybody shared any in the chat, Alex?
Yes, we see taking on too many hours at work and being in a state of overwhelm, trying to blend the actions into the work schedule, having a ton of tools and then continuing to look for more tools. And then you forget what you're using and events. Didn't plan ahead, not having accountability or reasonable time to take the steps.
There's some themes in there. Like I'm hearing it's about being able to create the time for yourself to do it. I bet I would be not surprised if everybody had overwhelm written down on their list. It was the first thing I wrote down. I also had a thing written down about time. And I had something written down about worried about my chances of success. So if I find a new recipe to make, am I actually going to like it? Then just that thought makes me less likely to want to try to make a new recipe. Because part of my problem is I make like the same 3 things all the time and I'm very sick of them.
Not having a plan drafted out before scheduling things. It would be the night before everything is due. Family members would be maybe a bit nosy. And then worried about failure.
That's a very kind way, I think, to say parents are on your back. I talk to a lot of kids about homework. I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
I reworded it.
Yeah. That fear of failure, that's so huge. That can really make us like turn away from things, you know?
Not having time to decompress between the tasks or the meeting.
Yeah. I like that too. Time is so important is what I'm hearing. So we've described the shenanigans. We've described our worst case scenario. So what are the themes? Did you notice anything? Did anything surprise you about what you wrote down?
This can be done as a journal or if you'd like to come off mute or in chat.
I realized that so I like to do big batch cooking and then I tell myself I'll eat the same thing for lunch and dinner for the next 3 days. But by the end of day 2, I want that to be true about myself. I really want that. And then I don't have to cook as often. And then everything's just easier. I don't have to find these new recipes. But I think I need to acknowledge that actually that's not true for me. By day 3, I don't want to eat this and then I don't. And then I eat out or do something else that's like counterintuitive. So I think I'm doing that, what I like to call the classic ADHD thing of being tragically optimistic.
Someone identified the theme of having to plan alone, not really being in it with anyone else, feeling disappointed just.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I wonder what's helpful about doing it. I'm the same. I love doing things with other people. Yeah, somebody's giving that a thumbs up. I wonder if that person wants to come off mute. You don't have to and share more about that.
Yeah, I guess what came up for me with that was because when I really went another layer of like, why, like, what is it about the planning, even though I know that's helpful. And then it was like with parenting, with like meal planning, with being an entrepreneur and working from home, it's like, yeah, just feeling like I'm doing a lot of the things by myself. And then it just like this lack of motivation and accountability that then like adds another layer of like the shame and disappointment that I wasn't accountable to myself. And even if I'm pulling in other people, like even with an ADHD coach and things like that, but it's not exactly the same as like someone living in my house who's like, we're going to eat this meal together and things like that. The loneliness of that, I guess, in the relationship with myself too.
Yeah. Just for context, what's your thing that you're trying to solve here?
I'm having trouble like holding a time structure for myself, like working from home, being like the sole parent responsible for childcare, meals, pickup, drop-offs, everything, and trying to start a business and just like finding it hard to, like get all of the things into my days.
That is so, like living alone, parenting alone, working for yourself. That is so much self-imposed structure that you have to put in, you know, and I think during COVID, so many people realized how much the structure of having to be at a certain place at a certain time was very, very helpful for them. And so that cognitive load that you've had to take on to do all of that, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Anybody else have anything they want to share?
We have one that's gotten quite a bit of feedback of crazy overwhelm of trying to fight the urge to do all of the things at once.
Oh, yeah. Did that person want to come off mute?
Sure.
Thank you.
It's just like feeling like if I don't do all of the things all at once, then I'm not going to get anything done at all. And feeling like if I don't do all of the things all at once, then I'm going to lose track of all of those things. It just, and that even like that barely encapsulate the all of the things all at once.
I think because I often think about like, well, what do you get out of doing it that way? And you've just explained that. The reason you try to do all the things at once is then you don't lose any of them. It sounds like you can hold it all, which is helpful in some way.
Yeah.
But also not.
Until it fails miserably.
Yes. So I'm wondering, if part of yours, that's an important thing for you, being able to keep track of all of the things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I wonder what else, so you have gotten lots of love of this.
I have another one that kind of relates to that.
Okay.
I think I also do that too, where I think that I have to do like all the 5 things on my to-do list for work before like Monday at 4:00 when and I'll work till like 7, 8 o'clock to finish it. Whereas my colleagues in Europe will be like, it's 5, bye. I didn't finish everything. And that's great for them. But I also I am a fairly young female in a heavily male dominated world. And so there's a combination of like imposter syndrome and failure. And I think both in professional and personal, it's like, well, I'm going to do everything I can to like avoid starting my monthly report because of like kind of a fear of failure and the imposter syndrome. And then anything that like I'm interested in life, like learning new skills or reading about certain things that interest me, I don't start those things because I feel like I'm just going to fail at them anyway, or like they're going to, it's going to flee after a week. So why bother?
Yes. Yeah. And you're right. We have this assumption. A lot of people with ADHD can very easily fall into this all or nothing thinking. And I like to think about, well, like, why is that? What do we get out of that? And one of the things can be, well, if we can do all of these things, we're a failure. And if something, or we're not a failure. And if something starts to slip and then we feel that feeling of failure, we back away from it all because it feels so awful for us. Because what I believe is that for most of our life, people with ADHD have been tried to be in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, prepared, paying attention, and we just couldn't. It was just really hard for us. And then people didn't teach us what we needed to do for our brains to make that happen. And so they look at you and they say, well, what's wrong? Are you stupid, broken, lazy, unmotivated? Do you not care? And when we can't explain it to ourselves, we definitely can't explain it to somebody else. And then the super dangerous thing happens and we start to believe those things to be true about ourselves. But those things are not true at all. But we just don't have another explanation. And when the adults, I think this happens when we're young, start telling this to us, it's what we believe. And then that can make us so fearful of failure. And it can make us really want to always be proving ourselves and that we do have worth.
That's the weirdest thing because like I'm almost 33. Growing up, like I was an overachiever. I was a smart kid. I like got everything right, did everything right. I was always that person. And I wasn't diagnosed until I was 32. So those things kind of relate. So yeah, I've never also been in a place where I'm like, the fear of failure, what's that? Imposter syndrome, what's that? And now it's just screaming in my head all the time.
When did that start for you?
Probably when I took on the role that I am in now. So I would say about 2 years ago. I feel like the ADHD tendencies of like being overwhelmed by everything, so not doing anything, have been there for probably since I was in college. So about 15 years now, but including the imposter syndrome and all of that. Yeah, about 2 years.
How did you feel in your previous role in terms of competence and confidence?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's also like, I feel like in that sense, I'm letting others dictate how I feel and how I think of myself solely because of what they seem to want to say or think.
What does that mean?
We have kind of two people in the company that are known to just be downright bullies to anybody and anybody. Like they don't care who you are. It's not personal, but they're just pretty mean. And so when they start to say things about the market I cover, the region I cover, it starts to feel personal. And I've had comments actually from one of them be like, well, the person that replaced me has absolutely no experience, but a lot of charisma. And I was like, you don't have my resume. You don't know anything about me.
Yeah. So how do you think that ties to how you feel about it?
I think that just makes me want to climb into the hole more and more.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So this ties, if you'd like to stay on for this next part, you can be our example. So this ties really nice into the next part, which is a gut check. So how do we feel? And I don't know about you, but I really struggle to actually articulate a feeling. And it's really helpful because once we acknowledge it, we name it, it can be helpful in having it pass and it helps us understand a little bit more. So I don't know if you guys have seen one of these before. There's many different versions. This is the feelings wheel. So the way that it works is everything on the left are your feelings when your needs are not being met, which generally the things that we don't like to feel. And on the right, when our feelings or our needs are being met, feelings we like to feel. If you start at either the top or the bottom and go in the direction of the arrows, the feelings get more intense. So if we look at red, angry, aggravated is like the lesser end of that, and furious is obviously the more intense end of that. And then I often need a ruler or something for this. If you look directly across, that is the feeling that's the opposite of that. And I find that interesting because sometimes I'm not sure if this is how I feel, but when I read the opposite, it can verify that or not. And it kind of lets me know, and then I think about, well, what would I need to get there? So if I was feeling furious, the opposite of furious is satisfied, which I think is interesting because I don't always see it at first. When you think about what's happening at work, what feelings come up?
It's gotten like, it started as just like frustration and overwhelm, and it started increasing to anger. And it actually eventually resulted in tears to my boss and her boss because, in a meeting, the same people were kind of attacking a bunch of us. And it was like, look, this is what we go through all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So you said frustrated, and which is in the angry judgment category. And across from that is harmonious, which is in the peaceful acceptance category. So when you came today, what were the things that you were hoping to figure out around this?
I don't know. I just like I like the title of the workshop, like kind of what has you stuck? And I'm like, well, I know what has me stuck. I just don't know how to kind of climb out of that hole.
What's the way that these feelings that you have about this are impacting you at work? Like specifically, where are you stuck?
In that I just will put off a task as long as I have to, which then will result in me working some nights until like 8, 9 o'clock because the thing isn't done yet. Or I just get very overwhelmed and things just start to pile up. And also when I get very overwhelmed, I have eczema all over my body and I just get very itchy. So it's the endless cycle of scratching.
Yeah. Okay. So we all come up with our feelings that come up when we think about this, our thing. Okay. So first, these feelings that come up are very normal and important. And it can be really tempting to want to like not lean into them and push them away and not feel them. And that's obviously pretty dangerous. And it makes sense that you would react and feel this way because there's things that have happened. There's contexts that have happened in your past, like with these people or with something else that bring up these feelings in you. So if you've had a history of homework being really difficult to start or having bad reactions from your teacher for missing homework or whatever, and now you feel anxious when you think about it, all that makes sense. And I think that the reason I'm saying all this is because when we feel shame about these emotions, that's really unhelpful. They're there for a reason, and we're here to try and understand and unpack them and then come up with a solution. Catherine, you want to speak to that? Yes, please.
When I was in high school, I definitely had like worse reactions to like stuff being late. And then in college, it got a little bit better. And I'm actually in an online program right now. And it's even more flexible with like stuff being turned in late. And I've often like emailed my professors like out of fear. And I tell them how like fearful I am, and not using the word fear exactly, but just kind of like, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't want you to be mad at me. Like, I don't want you to make it worse. But then they're like, no, it's okay. And there's a flexible university program. And I'm like, no way. That's crazy.
How does that impact you when they react to you that way?
It makes me feel really relieved and like a little bit confused.
Tell me about the confusion.
I guess I'm just so used to feeling like I'm going to fail or like I'm going to be a disappointment to someone that it's just it's confusing when the reaction is not that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So specifically for people with brains like us, we have some similar thought patterns, and these are things that can come up. We all have a lot of similarities, but we're also wildly different people. So all of these or none of these might ring true for you. There's reasons for all of them. So like often the perfectionism can come from being criticized so often or feeling the need to prove yourself. Or I think that it's personal theory, but I think people with ADHD are like wildly talented at like high level stuff. We can be the superstar of the show, given the right support, right environment, right situation. But we really struggle with like mundane, usually for us, boring stuff like wearing 2 matching clean socks to the gym. It's not a thing that usually happens for me. So, but then when people the rest of the world views it like some sort of pyramid, and it's just not. And so if we feel less than or shame or criticized about that, then we can really feel the need to be perfect to prove that to ourselves or other people. Or it could be something different. I'm trying to give some examples. So people pleasing can be very similar to that. We can bust our own boundaries to try and make sure that people are going to love and accept us and think that we're smart. Time management. And I honestly think that for me and people I've spoken to, time management can be really tied to people pleasing. That we can't say no, that we're tragically optimistic, especially with time, and we don't want to let people down. And so we say yes to too many things too close together. Prioritizing and decision making, that can be hard when it feels like everything is important to us and hard to know, because again, we don't want to let people down. Memory and forgetfulness, even if you've got a good system, it can be hard to remember to look at the thing. Over and underestimation, that can be around time, energy. We're just so optimistic. We just think, well, on my best day with hitting all the traffic lights and I have all the energy and everything's going to happen, we can get there, make it happen. Or we're so afraid because we've had it fail before that we don't even, that whole, I have an appointment at 2 p.m. so I can't do anything in the morning. We don't want to do something we're going to overestimate or underestimate the time and then be late. And then the tragic optimism. I think this is a theme because we love a long shot. We love relying on that thing because sometimes it works. So time to keep getting curious. So what contributes to these feelings that show up for you? What are the reasons? So there's a context. What are the reasons that go into these feelings? And what thoughts come up when you think about doing this task? Okay, yeah, let's do silent journaling. Good idea, Alex.
What feelings are we specifically addressing?
So the feelings, when we did the feelings wheel, we figured out the feelings that come up for us when we think about doing this task. Okay. So increasing the odds. So how can we do things differently? So again, behavior makes sense in context. You're not broken. There's a reason for all of these things. So if you could now think of this scenario, what would be the ideal situation for this? So like I talk to a lot of kids about homework and they're like, I can't pay attention in class. I'm like, okay, what would be the ideal situation? And they're like, well, the walls would have pink polka dots on them and the ceiling would be this color and that. And you're like, and I mean, it might seem like, okay, well, that's never going to happen. But I think, well, what does that really tell me? It tells me that it's not visually interesting enough for them and there's something that they want there. So let yourself say things, even if they don't seem practical or reasonable. Write them down. See what comes up for you. Okay, now I'm going to stop talking so you can write. So tell me, what did you notice about your perfect scenario? Was there anything that came out that surprised you? Is there anything that you wrote about that maybe seems like a far off thing, but has a clue in it to what might be helpful? Is there any way that you could do a small part of the thing that feels like pink polka dots on the wall?
Approaching decision-making with play and experimentation.
Oh, I like that. That sounds like a real mind shift.
Getting some hearts.
Yeah.
I'm guessing either others really liked that idea or also came up with it themselves.
Yeah. Does anybody want to share about that? Amy or anyone else?
Yeah, I can share what I just wrote. I feel like a lot of times I
just feel a lot of pressure to get, like when we're at work, we're kind of seen as the person who has to like get to the right solution. And it's all very like individual based. And all that pressure is just so much overwhelm that I tend to find myself just trying to relieve myself of that pressure by just having fun with it and experimenting different kinds of solutions and kind of just going to the teams or whoever I work with saying like, hey, I don't know the answer, but let's invite more play to this. And my art practice has really helped me like integrate that into like professional settings.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that. I love that I don't know the answer because I kind of believe that too. And I say that to people when I'm coaching. Like I'm like the crazy off the wall, ingenious, smart things that my clients come up with, I never would have thought of. And I think that I think that relieves that pressure from you and then that probably frees up your brain to actually be in a more creative problem solving kind of thing. And it encourages, puts it on those around you and allows you to tap into all of them as well.
Yeah, definitely.
What an empowering thing for them.
We have a change of scenery, like in-person collaborative meetings instead of Zoom calls all day.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that I'm an extrovert. It is just hard. I was thinking about that when someone shared about Monica, all of that, doing that things by yourself. Just having somebody else there can just make it so much easier.
My tool system will feel light and simple, but effectual. Perfect scenario would be a continuous Pomodoro cycle of doing the tasks and integrating breaks and not going into hyper focus on either the task or the break.
Oh yeah, that's the tricky part about that. I wonder what it would take to make that happen. Anybody have anything else they want to share around this? Any insights they had or something they noticed?
Uploaded the remembering and figuring out the next bit.
Oh yeah, I love uploading, remembering. I kind of figure that by the time people with ADHD have dementia, we're going to be set. We're going to be the ones at the senior center teaching everybody else how to survive because we know we can't trust our mind. We got all the systems tricks figured out.
We have someone playing with the possibility that entrepreneurship could look different for them, like getting contracted with people who they're teamed up with and the structure's already there.
What I really hear a lot of is like giving yourself permission to do it differently. And I think so often in life, we're told like, here's where you got to get to, and here's the way that you've got to get there. And for most brains that works, but when it doesn't, then we feel like we just spend all this time and effort trying to do it this way. But giving yourself permission to come outside that and see what really works for you and be okay with that and know that there's like magic and wonderfulness on your path that you're on and brilliance. So now we're going to do another gut check with our feelings wheel here. So if you had this system in place, the dream one, and I said, okay, after this call, you're going to have to get off, whatever you've got to do now is gone, and you're going to do that. What feelings come up for you now around this? It may be the opposite of what you were feeling before. It might be something else.
Excitement and inspiration.
Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer that it's feelings that keep us from doing things. That if it was just as simple as tips and tricks, I always say ADHD, the internet would have solved ADHD because it's so full of those things. And I think when we don't really know what's going on for ourselves and why a system isn't working and we try all these different things, just like throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks. And I think it's actually dangerous because we try something and it doesn't work and we don't know why it didn't work. And then we just feel worse about ourselves. So I think it's really important to understand and dig into what's specifically not working and then give yourself this permission to try something different.
They'd feel interested, curious, optimistic, curious again. Can't wait to get started on tasks.
Yeah. Yeah. I love curiosity. I think curiosity is the opposite of judgment, and judgment can be dangerous. So how to move forward? Because there's some things I've learned in my time as a coach that we love to make a plan. We get all excited about it. And then if something doesn't go right, we throw it out the window. And I think that can be for a number of reasons. And some of the things I've heard is one, at least for myself, I hate having to make another plan. So I'm done. we can feel failure and we feel bad that plan didn't work. And the shame of facing that makes us not want to look at it again. We're like, oh, another agenda I bought and didn't work. Add that to the graveyard. So it's important to know that this is like a draft of your plan, and it's definitely not going to work perfectly the first time around. And that is totally okay, because you're going to learn so much from it not working. So checking in with yourself, because here's the other thing. There's usually signs that it's starting to not work. You're feeling like, oh, I don't want to put the effort in to do this step of it. That's a sign that it's not working, and you're not going to be able to white knuckle it for forever. So think about that, investigate that. What's really going on? How can you modify it to make it work better for you, to make it easier for you? So check in with yourself and your feelings, because, I think people with ADHD, it seems like we go from 0 to 100 in 1 second. But oftentimes there's all of these little checkpoints along the way, but we've got lots of practice ignoring our feelings and like being in hyper-focus. And so checking in with yourself and seeing how that's going. And then like, what do you need to do to make that happen? Because if I was at this presentation and someone said that, there's no way I would remember that. So if it's something I wanted to do, I'd like need to write that down to put a reminder in later or something else. So whatever that is for you, if that's something you want to do. Regularly plan and pivot. So I guess I kind of covered this partially. So it's okay to pivot. There's genius in pivoting. Some people, it's your plan. You're building this to you. You're learning as you go along. And then talking to your coach if you have one, or even a friend or someone else with ADHD, someone else who is going to be okay with you choosing another path, exploring that way to do it differently. Maybe someone who also does that or has experience with that, someone to bounce your ideas off of. I also think just in terms of the doing things alone is hard and involving someone else in all kinds of things, I think we can feel shy or nervous to ask people, but honestly, most people are struggling with this stuff. When I speak to students, they're like, oh, I don't want to ask my roommate to body double. That person is probably, even if they have ADHD or not, a lot of people appreciate these kinds of things, So I wouldn't make that assumption. What if you're in such a mess that you don't have time to check in and figure out how to pivot because of overdue work? Does that person want to come off mute and explain more?
I can come off, but as you mentioned about like the not fully understanding things yourself are hard to explain to other people. It's just like, it is such a mess that it can be hard to explain.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a certain thing to say more about maybe?
I'm wondering. So when you think about checking in and planning and pivoting, how much time do you think that's going to take?
Well, it feels like it takes me a lot of hours when I try to do it, and I still don't get it done. And so then I'm just out time and didn't get a better system in place, which is part of why I'm here, because I'm not effectively making systems.
Yeah. So I would be curious about, that's a really good thing to be aware of. You're right. Two things there. So I wonder when times are that you've been able to plan effectively. What types of plans have worked for you?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay, fair enough. I think it's a coach could be helpful with that to help explore those things more. That's a really helpful piece of self-awareness to know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, Alex has said too that we've got some body doubling. Shimmer offers lots of body doubling sessions. There's one coming specifically on taxes, which can be particularly hard. Lots and lots of shame and frustration and confusion around taxes, that's for sure. Someone said, so hold on, do we have more slides, Alex? And then maybe we can go into the chat. Oh, any questions? Perfect. What do you, Alex, should we go through the questions in the chat? What do you think?
I'm going to go ahead and stop recording so we can have an open conversation for anyone that didn't necessarily want to share.